What's the role of bureaucracy in reform when it comes to the development sector?
Bureaucracy is part of the system,
Okay.
and any given reform is likely to affect them, some for the better, some for the worse. Now, if you look at civil service reform,
Yes.
what happens is it's decided or discussed between politicians and civil servants. Now, what do politicians want? Politicians want control, but not capability. Civil servants want security, but not competition. We are trying to fix a machinery which was designed to move slow.
Okay.
So government is a machinery which is designed to move slow, and that's not a design fault. That's deliberate. Because what is at stake? Public money, public trust.
I have shared a graph with you. You have have it on a piece of paper. This is GDP per capita growth. And if you see in 1960s, and if you compare Pakistan with other countries like Southeast Asia, we were neck to neck with these guys, right, in terms of our GDP per capita. But now we are at the bottom. We have been at the bottom for decades.
Southeast Asia chased exports.
Yes.
What did we chase? We chased rents.
Hmm.
How did they chase exports? Through productivity. What did we embrace? We embraced patronage.
If you were in a position to define five, factors or five triggers or, five key areas where you would work to actually drive the reform sector in a way that we actually move parallel to these other countries in terms of growth avenues, what will be those five factors?
I would not come up with a magical list because there are no magical 5 words that can fix Pakistan. What can fix Pakistan is having the right incentives.
Hi, Assalamu alaikum everyone, and welcome to Perspective by Impetus. I have a thought leader with me today who is a multifaceted personality. He's a development sector consultant, very accomplished. He's a politician. He's a brilliant writer. I have Hasaan Khawar with me. Assalamu alaikum, Hasaan.
Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you so much for taking out the time.
Thank you for having me here.
Hasaan, I have a question, a very generic one. What are your thoughts about the reform sector in Pakistan?
Reform is a marketplace.
Okay.
There are many goods on the offer. There are not enough buyers. That's what I want to say.
Okay. So that's a very complex sort of a sort of an answer. No one ever looks at reform like a marketplace, right? It comes with an agenda to sort of make everyone's lives better. Why did you call it a marketplace?
Reform is not a technical upgrade. Many people look at reforms as a better policy, as a better software,
Yes.
as a new law. To me, reform is not that. Reform is not an upgrade, the kind you would have on your computer or on your iPad or on your phone. Reform is essentially political redistribution of power.
Okay.
Reform is about who wins what, and who loses what. Now, what consultants do is that they come up with great solutions which are built for impossible political realities. And why I say it's a market is that for reforms to work, you need buyers who have political capital and who are willing to pay the political price. And you have those buyers with the right capital and the right willingness to buy for a long time, the reform market will develop on its own. Better players would come in, better solutions would come in, but you have to run it like a marketplace.
Okay. That's a very interesting answer. And um, okay, so that brings me to my next thought from this. That you talked about, it's a give and take process where you have to let go of something. What's the role of bureaucracy in reform when it comes to the development sector? What do they have to lose? What do they have to gain? Coming, from you because you are a bureaucrat, ex-bureaucrat yourself. What would you say for that?
Bureaucracy is part of the system,
Okay.
and any given reform is likely to affect them, some for the better, some for the worse. It really depends. So, for example, if you bring in civil service reforms and tenure security, they will be winners. If you bring in private sector talent and make it a competitive marketplace,
Yes.
they will be a loser.
Yes.
So, but they are part of the system, and by definition, any reform will change the system, so they are bound to affect.
Okay, so you talked about the civil sector reform and you said there will be winners. Can you elaborate upon that? Has that happened recently and was it successful? What were the factors behind its success?
Hard to find successes in Pakistan when it comes to reforms,
Okay.
but I think Nadra is a great example. It happened quite a while back.
Mm-hmm.
Good reform. I think it happened because the problem was very simple and straightforward. The state could not credibly identify who were its own citizens and who were the people who are living in this country. Uh, they were ready to pay the political price and they were ready to part with the old system. Because if you recall, Nadra was not just about automating the database, or it was not just about digitizing the database. It was a new way to do things.
Yes.
And there was a compact to break away from the old ways of doing that. So the old machinery was discarded and a new institution was set up. And then you throw in the mix the new political realities of post 9/11 world, where Pakistan was going through a security shift.
Yes.
And registration was no more a peripheral function. It became a partner in law enforcement, in counterterrorism. So that gave it a lot of force. And then, of course, it had the might of the state at its back. General Musharraf was the president back then. And you let it happen and let it brew like a cup of coffee for some time. And we get a great institution and a great system. And I think Pakistan was the winner ultimately in that reform.
Okay, great. So every actor sort of, that plays a part in reforms had a particular agenda when it came to Nadra and it sort of, aligned with their priorities. But if I ask you the contrary, like sort of an example where a reform failed, and why do you think it failed, where everybody was sort of expecting it to be a super successful reform? And you can, pick and choose because there are a few examples I'm sure that you can
I can
pick
give
from.
you as many examples as you want,
Yeah.
but let me pick civil service reforms
Okay.
because that's an example that has not failed once or twice. It has failed repeatedly,
Mm-hmm.
and every other year, it's our favorite topic to pick and to try a new idea. Now, if you look at civil service reform,
Yes.
what happens is that it's decided or discussed between politicians and civil servants. Now, what do politicians want? Politicians want control, but not capability. Civil servants want security, but not competition. Both sides have veto power in the discussion, both wanting different things. Citizens are not on the table, they are not heard, they don't have a vote. So, of course, it will not be resolved
Yes.
because two people are talking about different things. So, that's one part of it. The other part is that essentially what we are trying to do is we are trying to fix a machinery which was designed to move slow.
Okay.
So, government is a machinery which is designed to move slow, and that's not a design fault. That's deliberate. Because what is at stake? Public money, public trust, a huge size that you are working with. So, essentially, you need a slow moving, reliable, stable machine. Now, what's happening? We are trying to fix the machine to make it more agile,
Yes.
responsive, innovative, to move fast. It's not supposed to do that. If you see what I'm trying to say, that the ability of the machine not to move fast is not the problem.
Yes.
The need for urgency in the government is the real problem. That's what needs to get fixed. And we don't try to fix that.
Okay. And I think it's very explicit in the data that we see as well, that that need for urgency is missing, right? So I have shared a graph with you. You have have it on a piece of paper. This is GDP per capita growth And if you see in 1960s, and if you compare Pakistan with other countries like Southeast Asia, we were neck to neck with these guys, right, in terms of our GDP per capita. But now we're at the bottom. We have been at the bottom for decades. And even if I do have a handout for just South Asia, and if you look at the graph, we're at the bottom even compared to Bangladesh, Sri Lanka. And we still don't have that urgent feeling of, actually doing something in case of reforms in Pakistan. Why do you think that is the case? Where will that urgency then come from?
So that's a great example. Southeast Asia chased exports.
Yes.
What did we chase? We chased rents.
Hmm.
How did they chase exports? Through productivity. What did we embrace? We embraced patronage. And so basically, if you look at Southeast Asia, you look at the government trying to change behavior of the private sector and the firms through policies. Policies were used to discipline them, to incentivize them, to hold them accountable. What did we do? We used government to control, limit, protect, access, and everything. So private sector is very responsive. You subject it to a policy like Southeast Asia did, they would invest in efficiency, they would invest in scale, they would invest in competitiveness. If you subject them to strict government controls, then what would they invest in? They would invest in access, connections. So, as a result, what did you get? You end up having a system on one hand, which is rewarding firms that compete globally. And in Pakistan, you have a system where you reward firms that are connected locally. So you have a productive state versus a distributive state. And that is why there the focus is on expanding the pie, whereas we have been fighting on dividing whatever pie we had. And that I think comparison is quite stark. So without that, we could not have what the Southeast Asia had.
Yes. Hassan, so it's very obvious that, we're not working towards that particular goal that you talked about, expanding the pie. And if you were in a position to define five, factors or five triggers or, five key areas where you would work to actually drive the reform sector in a way that we actually move parallel to these other countries in terms of growth avenues, what will be those five factors? And you have time to think.
I would not come up with a magical list because there are no magical 5 words that can fix Pakistan. What can fix Pakistan is having the right incentives. As I said, you have to get the incentives right for the private sector to participate productively. They will respond to whatever you offer.
Yes.
So you can import a policy, you can import a law, you can import a system, a software, but unfortunately, you cannot import an institution at once. So what is institution? Institution is a set of incentives that are applied for a long enough time to be able to shape people's behaviors. Now look at Pakistan. If Pakistan has to grow, private sector has to grow, which means what? That you have to come up with a predictable policy environment. Talk to you about Southeast Asia, right? So you have a system where you give assurances to the private sector that it is beneficial for you to invest in scale, to invest in efficiency, to invest in your own capabilities.
Mhm.
And you do that for a long enough term, you will be able to reap benefit and profits.
Exactly.
We have not given that signal in Pakistan. We need to change that. So we need to have a system which can outlive regimes,
Yes.
which can outlive governments, where private sector knows that this is my incentive, and trust me, it will react and behave in the direction you want it to react and behave. Government, on the other hand, would need to minimize its footprint. They need to be very clear what is a public good, what is essentially their role, and how can they facilitate the private sector. When you go and talk to government, and I'm not talking about one particular government, I'm talking about government in Pakistan in general at all tiers, they say we want investment.
Yes.
Unfortunately, government says that, but it is wired to repel investment, not attract investment. And we need to change that. And once you start changing that, I think the trajectory will change.
Hassan, I'll pivot a bit um, because I really wanted to ask you this question. You come from a background of bureaucracy, right? You were in a position where you could actually bring change from being inside the system, planted inside the system, right? As a part of the bureaucracy machine. Why did you choose to move out? Why did you choose to become a development sector consultant when you could be that force of change within the system?
Civil service does give you influence.
Yes.
That influence, however, come without the control over the outcomes.
Really?
So that's a very dangerous place to be, where you have power, you have influence, but you can't control the outcomes. Then what will you control? You will end up controlling processes to the best you can. And hence, we get the bureaucracy that we have today. Also, I think if I look at myself, I'm an independent minded person
Yes.
and I'm a risk taker. Government does not reward initiative, government does not reward risk taking, government rewards compliance. And I thought I was not being authentic to myself when I was there. Uh, what do you need in a career? You need it to be inspiring, you need it to be rewarding financially, and you need it to be means to be authentic to yourself. I did not find any of these. I'm not saying it's not there for people who want some sort of stability, who are comfortable in their skin
Yes.
with being influenced without being able to control the outcomes. I think civil service is a fantastic career for them. It wasn't for me.
And has it changed over time since the time you left versus, if you look at it now in terms of that ratio of control and power? Do you think it has changed because of, recurrent reforms and all, or do you think it's still the same?
It never changes.
Okay.
The more it changes, the more it stays the same.
Okay. Okay. Fair enough. And you were recently leading Seed, a very um, everybody talks about it. It's a very wholesome sort of a project in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. It had a lot of avenues to support the government in terms of provincial growth. How was that experience? You've worked on climate change through that, investments, pension reforms. How was that in terms of also progress, also satisfaction as a change maker? How was that for you?
Phenomenal. Really, it was a great experience because we were working in a province which was deprived, which was underprivileged. There was a lot of room for change, and I personally found it quite rewarding. I also found out firsthand there's a very famous book by Wu Chung Kim, who was the founder of Daewoo.
Okay.
And the title of the book is Every Street is Paved with Gold. And when you work with the government, and KP government is not one of the most affluent governments, you find out that government has so much resources, untapped potential
Yes.
that you can use to create liquidity, to create investment, to create growth. You just need to put that to use. And I think that was a profound learning for me personally.
What would you rate as the key success that you gained out of this project, and what do you think didn't work?
That's a longer discussion, but I personally hold my failures very close to my heart compared to my successes.
Hmm.
Successes are a figment of our imagination. If something goes well, we arbitrarily assign some random factor to its success, and then the story becomes, I did this, and that's why it succeeded. It doesn't happen like that. It never happens like that. On the other hand, failures make you learn a lot of things because you introspect, you are disappointed, you go in with high hopes, and then you are kind of pulled back. And I think that's the real moment of truth. So we did have our share of failures. There were things that we tried which were ahead of their times. There were things that we thought were much promising, which didn't turn out to be as promising.
Like which ones?
So, for example, we worked on a behavioral science unit in KP, and we started that work back in 2020.
Okay.
And we were quite inspired by the nudge unit work in UK, in Lebanon, elsewhere. I think we were ahead of our time for KP. I also thought that some of the results that we witnessed were not as promising as we would have liked them to be.
Okay.
But we learned from them, we reprogrammed, and then we invested and focused more on areas where we could have gotten higher impact.
Okay. How was the work on pension reforms? How did that pan out?
It was great. And I think what gives me some comfort is that KP was the first province where we pioneered those reforms, and then other provinces followed suit.
Yes.
But I would like to look at pension reforms also as a marketplace where there are many solutions that have tried elsewhere, pretty much all across the world.
Yeah.
And you have a number of things that work. But you have to look at the marketplace, that who are the buyers, what kind of capital do they have, and what price are they willing to pay. And I think that's where the real challenge of the pension reform is. There is a lot to offer on the market, and there is still a lot of work that need to be done, but we have to wait for the buyers to either have more political capital or have a higher willingness to pay the political price for those reforms. They have to come sooner or later because there is a fiscal compulsion that will force those reforms on us. I just hope that we have enough time to be able to take on those reforms willingly rather than let them be enforced and imposed upon us.
Yes, so true. And Hassan, lastly, just before wrapping up the discussion, I wanted to ask: there are so many young people who want to come into the development sector, who either want to be a bureaucrat or want to make some sort of an effort towards change in Pakistan, towards reform in Pakistan. What are those tips that you'd like to share from your own experience with them that they can use to hone their skill set and to actually make some changes?
Change does not necessarily have to come from the development sector. Change has to come from you and from me. So I think the first word of advice is, if you want change, change yourself. The country may or may not have a plan for you, but you have to have a plan for you. Pakistan is the land of opportunities. People say US is the land of opportunities.
Yeah.
US and the developed world is the land of priced opportunities.
Okay.
Pakistan is a developing country where there are gaps. Those gaps bring in opportunities.
Exactly.
The opportunities are not priced in. So if you have what it takes, you can capitalize on them. When we were growing up, we were fond of saying things are not as good as they used to be. And guess what? It has not changed. At any given time, people say it's not as good as it used to be. It will never be as good as it used to be. You have to play with the cards you are dealt,
Yeah.
and eventually you will win.
So true. And for those aspiring bureaucrats, any word of advice?
Go for it if you have what it takes, and if it offers what you want, then go for it and go for it with full stake.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, Hassan, for taking out the time. It was such a wonderful discussion.
Thank you.